Years ago, I promised to take care of my friends' kids if anything happened to them. Now they're gone, and I'm the legal guardian, but we haven't spoken in years. My wife says no, and I'm torn between guilt, love, and the life I built without children. Am I the villain? Years ago, my wife and I were inseparable with another couple, a bond so deep it felt like family. We spent countless afternoons together in our late 20s and early 30s, navigating life's twists and turns as one tightly knit unit. When they welcomed their first child into the world, during a quiet conversation filled with nostalgia and hope, they gently asked if we would be willing to be listed as the legal guardians for their children, an arrangement to safeguard the little one should fate ever intervene. At that moment, the request seemed almost symbolic, a casual nod to future uncertainties rather than a solemn promise of lifelong commitment. We agreed without hesitation, signed the requisite paperwork, and life, in its persistent march, carried us along separate paths. Over the years, the closeness we once shared gradually dissolved into a distant, bittersweet memory. There was no bitter fallout or dramatic farewell, just the slow, inevitable drifting apart. We relocated to new cities, embarked on fresh career paths, and eventually, the communication that had once been as constant as the tide ceased altogether. For about 3 long years now, our lives have run parallel with no intersections. Then, just last month, the unthinkable happened. I received the gut-wrenching news that our old friends had both perished in a tragic carbon monoxide poisoning incident. In the blink of an eye, they left behind 2 innocent souls, a 12-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl, now facing a future without the guiding light of their parents. Soon after, a lawyer reached out to me with the news that, despite the twist of fate and the passage of time, we were still legally named as their guardians. I was utterly stunned. That distant conversation, once a relic of a bygone era, now materialized as a tangible responsibility. The reality was overwhelming. These children, so tender and full of life, had lost everything, and suddenly, there was an unspoken expectation that we step in and embrace them as our own. The truth is, my wife and I are torn. I feel an undeniable pull toward the children, remembering a time when their parents trusted us implicitly. But my wife feels quite differently. She has never been particularly close to them, and having chosen a lifestyle without children, she is adamant about not upheaving our lives over a promise made in more innocent times. I, too, wrestle with the thought of raising 2 grieving kids whom I haven't seen since they were little. Yet the loyalty and the echoes of past affection make the decision hauntingly complicated. We have a comfortable life, plenty of resources, and memories of being adored by these children when the ties to their parents were strong. Yet now the relationship feels like a ghost from the past. In my quest for clarity, I learned I am not legally compelled to accept guardianship. I can officially decline in court, but the heavy weight of guilt and responsibility still presses on me. I remain somewhat open to the possibility of bringing them into our lives, but I cannot force my wife to accept a life-altering change that she never envisioned, a reality that might even drive us apart. The mere thought of this potential decision fills me with remorse, and I feel like a terrible person for having once agreed to it with light-hearted optimism, despite how circumstances have evolved. Right now, these 2 vulnerable children are staying in an emergency shelter designed for those who have lost everything. I spent some time researching the conditions there, only to find that they were far from ideal. If we refused to take them in, they would be shuffled from home to home, reminiscent of an orphanage system where stability is as fleeting as a dream. In hopes of finding a better outcome, I plan to contact the lawyer to explore the possibility of them being adopted by someone else, or perhaps being fostered until a more definitive solution is found. Although my thoughts may seem a tangled web of uncertainties and half-formed plans, the legal processes in my country suggest that such an arrangement might indeed be within reach. I intend to approach my wife again and try to find some middle ground, perhaps agreeing to care for the children temporarily until a more permanent guardian can be arranged. Deep down, I am aware that my original promise was made under very different circumstances, and now that promise has become an unwelcome specter looming over our future. We live in a different city now, even though the shelter where the children currently reside is not far from where we live. I want to be clear, I hold no ill will toward their parents. In fact, it was their responsibility to consider that our closeness had faded over time, and that perhaps we weren't the ideal guardians anymore. I even recall questioning them at the time about why not choose closer relatives, to which the father had replied that the only alternative would have been the grandmother, a woman whose long-standing struggles with alcoholism made me pause. Just today, I spoke with the lawyer again and managed to visit the shelter. I found that only the girl was there while the boy was at another facility about an hour away. When our eyes met, she recognized me, a silent plea in her gaze as she asked if I was aware of the tragic loss of her parents. The lawyer mentioned that, possibly as soon as tomorrow, she could begin staying with us on a temporary basis. I am seriously contemplating accepting them into our lives permanently, but I am equally afraid of shattering the fragile piece of my marriage. I fear that disregarding my wife's wishes might ultimately drive us apart. Divorce is the last thing I want. For now, if everything falls into place, the girl will be staying with us temporarily starting tomorrow. Meanwhile, I will strive to ensure that these children receive the love, stability, and guidance they desperately need, whether through our permanent care or by finding them a more suitable, loving home through proper channels.